Okay, I'm at my friend Chuck's house here in town, and he has an apple tree that died and fell over and sprouted up all these suckers right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna select one shoot to be, the new tree, and then we're gonna graft it over to a bunch of different varieties. So we're gonna take the one in the back, and there's several reasons for that. So one reason is that this angle, this crotch, is too tight. In just a few years, they're gonna start to grow together. We'll get bark in here, it's called the bark inclusion. And eventually when it gets really big, one of these could end up splitting off pretty easily. That happens all the time. Down here, we have the same exact problem. I would prefer not to make these big cuts, but this is just kind of where the thing is, and that's it. So we're also gonna take off all this small growth here and everything up to a certain point. So the other reason I picked this one is because it has a lot of nice branches already. It has a more or less straight trunk. So we're gonna pick 3 or 4 of these to point in different directions. Those will get cut off to stubs near the trunk here. And each one of those will get grafted to a different variety. So right off the bat, we'll have 4 or 5 different varieties of apples on their own limbs. As the tree grows out and creates more structure, you can just keep adding, more varieties. That's pretty much limitless. If this grows into a full-size tree, it's not unfeasible to fit like a couple hundred varieties on here. We're also going to crank this back with a rope or something and tie it to this stake over here to get it more upright. And then in a year or two, it'll grow around that and set itself more straight, and then we can untie it. As you can see, some of these cuts are pretty big. The small ones are going to heal up fast, but these bigger ones are unpreferable. I mean, it's better not to do that. This is what happens when you have these kind of random suckers or trees that you're kind of restoring or bringing back from being just neglected and wild, is you end up having to make these big cuts. Yeah, okay. That looks like a normal tree. 1, 2, 3. So the other thing is these branches should be spaced evenly. The further apart they are, to an extent, the better, up to like 12 inches apart. I'm gonna make them as far as I can apart, and I have to sit here over and over again and look at the branches and figure out how I can get 4 in different directions that are evenly spaced, which is harder than it seems like it might be. My only regret is that I wish this branch was that branch, because this is going to grow out into the path, and the higher it is, the better. So another thing we may do later is when this starts to grow, and we could make this happen on purpose. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'll notch one of these buds to try to get it to grow in this direction, and then we can just take this one out completely. It won't be grafted this year, although we could also do that. We could cut a chip out of a scion and graft it into this piece of stem here and actually train that to grow, and it'll be its own branch. So maybe we'll do both and see how that goes. For now, I'm just going to leave it because we don't have scions today. I have to bring some scions down from home, and we'll graft it like in a couple of weeks or whenever. All right, I'm back here about a week later. So here's the plan. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 limbs. I'm going to go ahead and graft this one, but I'm actually going to try to replace it. I'm just going to do 3 different things to make sure we get this branch. This is the one I don't want because it's too close to these. But if I have this one, this one, this one, and then the one up here, they're all just perfectly beautifully spaced about 10 inches apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small chip with a bud in it right here. And also I'm going to notch one of these buds to try to get it to grow out. So we'll have 3 different options there, and as soon as we decide which one's doing the best or is going to be the right one, then we'll cut the rest of them off and just let that one grow. Okay, so let's prep this sucker. Now you may be thinking, gee, that was brutal. Yeah, sort of, but this tree is young and vigorous, and these grafts are going to take. I'll be pretty surprised if they don't all take. I mean, at the most, one of them is going to fail. So that'll leave plenty of places for the tree to push energy into this spring, and it's just going to grow like crazy. The reason I cut these back is because if these were much bigger, like an inch, I may have just started grafting out further out here, but since they're pretty small, I just as soon get them grafted way at the back so that everything that grows out from this point is going to be, you know, something that we want, because this, I think, is just, it's like an apple that's no good at all, basically. So I'm going to show you a couple different grafts here. Most of the time I'll do cleft grafts on these where the two pieces are really different sizes. I'm going to show you a way you can do this by just cutting a small cut on the top. Oops, that was a little big. Okay, so remember, it's all about the thin line between the bark and the wood. It's not the bark or the wood. If the bark on this is really thick and the bark on this is thin, which it is in this case, you need to shift this around so that the cambium lines up, not that the bark like, don't line up the outside of the bark. That's not what it's about. It's about that thin line right there. Okay, so we cut a tongue right there, like that. Cut one on here, and stick those together. You want to wrap these things nice and tight. This is PVC budding tape. It's made for this. But you can use all kinds of stuff. You can even get away with electrical tape. Strips of plastic bags cut up. Like earlier I was using like a toilet paper bag, plastic bag, thick plastic, or those garden bags that like manure and stuff come in, and potting soil. Those often work good. Okay, that's pretty stiff, so even if that gets bumped a little, it's not going to just move super easy. I might wrap it a little more. Better safe than sorry. And you want more than one wrap. Go for, like, you know, multiple wraps is going to squeeze it down nice and tight. Okay, so there's a Whitwick pippin. And generally I prefer to leave a lot of these buds, but for this one I'm actually going to cut it here. I would normally leave this full length, but I want this scion because I'm short on these scions this year. So here we have an even bigger size difference going. I'm going to do a cleft graft. This is really easy. It's a good graft for beginners. You just split this. Try to split it really centered down the center. Not the center of the growth rings, the center of the mass. Now on this, you want to make this like a long, even taper. Believe it or not, the barks are about the same thickness, so I'm putting this scion pretty much to the outside of the thing here. It's a pretty nice, long, even taper. Okay, so since this one's extra large, I'm going to put in a second scion over here, and that's just to help draw more sap and more growth and more healing, and it's going to heal this all up quicker. But only one of them is going to be allowed to grow in the long run. Probably this big one. I'm going to take one bud off of here, cut it out like a little chip, and put it into a equal cutout piece right here. I'm also going to notch this bud here like this. Just cut out the bark and a little bit of the wood. And that's going to do one of two things. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but it's either going to stop nutrients that are flowing up here and force them into that bud to make it grow, or stop chemical signals like hormones coming from the top that tell this bud not to grow. Okay, so I kind of want my branch right here because that's about 10 inches from this one. So first I'll prepare this stick. See, just one little chip. Well, I would certainly like it if this fit a lot better. I'm gonna go for it. If it doesn't take, it'll heal up, no big deal. It's a pretty bad fit though. We'll see. All right, so everything's done. We have mostly cleft grafts. I did that one whip and tongue just to show you. And then let's get up on the chair here. Okay, so here's this notch which should force energy into that bud. And then here's the chip, which I actually replaced. I realized I'd put the wrong variety on it. So I had a bigger scion of King David and I put that on here. And then here's a cleft graft at the top, and that'll be the central leader of the tree. Here's Chuck in his native habitat. So we're gonna put some aluminum tags on here for the long haul so we know what's what. And this whole thing's gonna get painted with some kind of whitewash to keep it from sunburning, because now that all this bark is exposed, it's definitely gonna sunburn. And after it sunburns, bugs will get in there and the whole thing, yeah, bad news. We're also gonna put grafting wax on any exposed wood here and on the entire scion and just seal it up completely. That's not always necessary. It's good to at least seal the end with some paint or white glue or something, but it does really help to seal it up and keep the moisture in while it heals, because this scion has to get by with whatever moisture it has until this union heals and starts to feed the scion. As soon as we're sure these are going to grow, anything else should get cut off consistently through the summer to make sure all the energy is forced into these growth points that where we want it. Got some of this stuff. I used to be careful to paint it kind of thin on the scion so that the buds could grow through, but then I just started slopping it on there and it always seems to work, so. Okay, so where this cleft is, I'm gonna put a piece of masking tape on here, and I just learned this trick a couple years ago, and I think on YouTube somewhere. And that just keeps the paint from running down and makes a better seal, so I can get a full kind of cap seal on this whole thing. Traffic, not used to traffic.